Hi guys, it's Mish again, and I'm gonna do a video about my bread dough recipe. At the beginning of the year this year, one of my New Year's resolutions was to learn how to bake bread, and I have one recipe which you can use for making bread, pizza, ciabatta, focaccia. You can use it for making naan breads. I've used the same recipe for so many different things. It's exactly the same recipe each time. It's a low salt, low sugar bread recipe. And today we're going to make a couple of white loaves. So I'm going to take you through it. We're going to measure out some white flour. I have strong white flour. There's all sorts of different things out there, but what I've found is strong white flour is one of the cheapest, and it's also one of the best. I've tried the different types, and this comes out just as good as any bread. In fact, it's going to fill your whole house with the smell of freshly baked bread. Okay, so I've put my measuring cup, or whatever you want to call it, on the digi-scales, and it's worth having digi-scales for this. You might have to click the button to get to the correct unit of measurement. So what we're going to do is we're going to measure out 500 grams of strong white flour. Yeah, I've gone over by 2 grams, but that doesn't bother me at all. My Kenwood mixing bowl is a metallic bowl, and it's cold to the touch. Now what you want to think of is that you are dealing with yeast. Consider bread to be like a living thing, and it doesn't like cold, just like you don't like cold. So what I do, by default, is run the hot water tap, run some hot water into it to warm the whole thing up, and then I dry the bowl off. Fill the bowl. That it's heated up this bowl nicely now, and dry it off, and that's the first step. Okay, so now we're going to put in our 500 grams of flour into the bowl. Get a teaspoon, not heaped, just flat, and put your salt on one side of the flour. So I'm using granulated white sugar, salt you put in your cup of tea, and a heaped teaspoon is good for this. So the recipe calls for 7 grams of yeast, which is 1 sachet. One of the things that I've learnt is that if you're kind of in a rush, or you want to get the dough to rise more quickly, that I put 2 sachets of yeast in it, and it doesn't spoil the bread whatsoever. We're going to put 350 millilitres of lukewarm water in this measuring jug. So I fill it up to the 100 milliliter line with boiling water from the kettle, and then top it up to 350 with cold water from the filtered Brita filter or from the tap. And then when you put your finger in, and remember to wash your hands first, it feels sort of body temperature. By rule of thumb, always best off putting your yeast in the hot water, not hot water, sorry, in the lukewarm water, just for maybe 2 or 3 minutes, maybe a few minutes first, just to let the yeast relax and expand and start to do its thing. So we're going to give that a little gentle stir so that the yeast granules aren't just floating on top, but they get sort of mixed up into the water. We let the yeast do its thing. It's a good time to go for a cup of tea, which is a good way of killing 5 minutes while you wait for the process to take place. The yeast looks ready to me. It's sort of formed quite a lot of bubbles on top. So it's now time to make our dough. Okay, so I've got my trusty mixer here, which is taking some of the hard work out of this process for me. You can do this without a mixing bowl. You can use your hands, you can use a wooden spoon. It's just a matter of whatever your preference is. I'm going to put it on a minimum speed just to mix the salt and sugar together. And that's enough just to combine those. What I'm going to do now is switch on the mixer on a minimum speed and gently, slowly add the yeast and water mixture. It has combined into one solid kind of mass. So I'm going to turn it up to speed 1 for 5 minutes, and then I'll show you what it looks like when we're done. I would highly recommend that you turn the heating up in your house to approximately 21 degrees centigrade, and that's the perfect temperature for your dough to rise. I'm quite happy with this. So I'm taking this this bowl to the side now so I can show you the dough. Before we let it rise, what we're going to do is we're going to choose the presentation side of our loaf, and we're going to give it a little bit of a roll and a little bit of a knead. So I'll show you how I do that. You want to be sure that you're working with a clean surface here. So I'm just going to put that little bit down there. And we're going to, so you end up with a ball like this. Now, it's quite normal to have cracks and creases and all that kind of thing in your dough. But one of the skills with dough, the real skills involved, is kind of making it look nice and the presentation of it. So I'm going to show you just a couple of quick techniques. So I'm just giving this a once over visually and choosing the side with the least amount of cracks on it. And that's going to be our presentation side. I'm going to slam that down, give it a little roll like that, and as you can see, that's created a nice smooth surface. And then what I'm going to do, using my hands and try and touch as little of the dough as possible, is what I'm actually doing is I'm tucking the dough ball under and twisting it. So can you see this? This is quite a big kind of crack or dent in the loaf. That technique I'm using to fold it is taking that crack and hiding it from the top. So wherever you get cracks, you work that under by rotating it and kind of tucking it. Because it's kind of slightly clammy, you can feel the dough moving as you do this. And so as you see, we're now getting quite a nice presentation side. I'm going to carefully flip it again. So presentation side, smooth it out, and give it another little bit of a roll like this. Tuck, twist, tuck, twist, tuck, twist, tuck. And then one more time. There we go. And this is now ready to let rise for an hour. This lovely little dough ball in the bowl, and then I'm going to stick a little tea towel over that to keep the heat in it. So there's the bowl with the dough in it, above the heater there on the window ledge. And I've got my heating set to 21 degrees, and that's going to sit there quite happily now for about 1 hour until the dough ball has kind of doubled in size. Okay guys, so it's been like a bit over an hour now, and it's been sitting there in the pot and I've not touched it, so let's have a quick look. Whew! Look at the size of that. So I'm just going to put the dough hook back on there, and then I'm going to put the bowl back on the mixer and beat it down. All the air's been beaten out of that, and as I showed you before, it's quite a sticky dough, which is just right for me. I'm going to take the dough back, and now we're going to shape that into our loaf. I'm going to put a little bit more flour here on the table. We're going to take the dough out. So let's just find the presentation side again, which is that side there. And now, because I made a 500 gram dough, I'm going to make 2 lovely little loaf tins full, 2 loaves. So we're going to get a sharp knife, and I'm going to split the dough into 2 halves. And exactly the same technique I showed you earlier, I'm going to pick a side and then tuck all the imperfections under. Because this is an oblong bread tin, you can make any shaped loaf you want, and if you have a look on YouTube at folding dough or shaping loaves, there's hundreds of techniques for different types of rolls, from your French baguette to your ciabatta bread, but what I'm going to do is kind of go for a rectangular shape. One of the biggest rules, in my opinion, is the presentation side. You should never have to touch it. So what you'll see is that I never actually touch top of it, if you've got a terrible shape or a terrible crack on your loaf, then you can always, you know, turn it over, give it a bit of a gentle roll like that. So what you're doing is creating the miniature version of the final loaf. Drop that into the middle of my bread tin, and it's nowhere near covering the tin, but it's going to rise for a second time now. So I'm going to take this one. I've got a feeling that there's a bit more dough on this one. And we're going to, let's get a bit of flour, make sure it doesn't stick to the bottom. We're going to just get a nice top there. Shape it into kind of that rectangular loaf shape. Make sure it's a consistent thickness and height all the way through the loaf, and then lovingly place that in your bread tin. I'll sprinkle a tiny bit of flour on top, which will stop the loaf from sticking to my towel I'm going to put over it. And this needs to go in one place for probably about half an hour, 40 minutes. So I'm going to do that and put it in the same place as before. So there they are, 2 loaves of bread in their tins, back in the warm place. And I'm going to put this towel back over them. You can pop one of these tins in the fridge, and that will keep overnight or for a day or so. So if you want to prepare your dough for 2 loaves of bread in advance, when you get to this stage, after they've risen for the first rise and been kneaded one more time, you can actually stick it in the fridge, and that'll just keep in the bread tin, ready to pop in the oven whenever you're ready. Okay, so it's been 20 minutes, and I've let the loaves sit in the tin there, just like that, so it's time for the big unveiling. I stick them in on gas mark 5 and let them cook for 20 minutes. One of the most important things is that you handle the loaf very, very, very gently at this stage, because it's quite easy for the loaf to collapse. So that's like if you move it too much, the air can escape, and the top, instead of being lovely and round, collapses in on itself. It doesn't, you know, make the bread taste any worse. It doesn't affect the outcome so much, except that you lose that wonderful loaf shape. Okay, the bread's been in for about 20 minutes. And I've turned it halfway through, and I'm just going to have a quick look now, and I'll show you where we're up to after 20 minutes. Wow. Oh my goodness, that is what I call a bread loaf. Now, to be 100% sure that the bread is fully cooked through, I normally give it a bit of a tap, and you can hear this sort of hollow sound. Tap your bread every time you do it. One day you'll get a loaf that's undercooked, and you'll see that there's a difference. So do that every time. So what I'm going to do now is run this spatula down the one side, try and free it from the bread tin without breaking it. It's quite difficult because the bread is clinging to the outside now, and I don't want to split the loaf. I think I've just done that. I think I've just split it slightly. So here it is. Now, so I'm going to turn. Remember, this is very, very hot, so I'm going to put the towel over it, pop it upside down. If we're lucky, I'm going to grab another towel, and I'm going to pull that up very carefully. Wow. And just going to check the bottom of it. Wow, that's come out beautiful. Yeah, that's come out perfect. So check the bottom, give it a tap. It's definitely done. What you want to do now at this point is let the bread stand upside down because there may be some steam, and the steam that rises out of the bread will make sure that the bread doesn't go stodgy or sort of undercooked inside. Just let it rest there upside down and let the steam rise up from the bread. I'm going to do the same thing. Run this from the outside. Oh, so this bread tin is a better tin. It's literally, the bread literally came loose immediately. I didn't really have to do much there. I'm going to turn that upside down. See how it just falls out? Whoa, look at that. What a wonderful loaf of bread. So I take my tins, put them to the side. Wow. So that's like a picture perfect loaf of bread. I guarantee that's going to taste delicious. I actually quite like eating the bread warm, but not when it's come directly out of the oven. So I recommend you leave it for at least 10 minutes and then tuck in. So let me know what you think of this guide. Let me know how your bread turns out. Subscribe to my channel, maybe send a comment in on the YouTube video and let us know how you got on.